Tamara Caulder Richardson, and welcome to the Seeking Heaven channel.
Well, welcome for real to the Seeking Heaven channel. Hope you're having a great day, and thanks for joining us today. So before we bring on the guest, I want to go over a couple announcements, and then we're going to jump right in here. So I am your host, Tamara Caulder Richardson, and thanks for being here. And I want to tell you a couple things about this channel and also about me. I do have an Ascension School, Academy of Divine Wisdom. If you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free 30-minute Christ-like, the same one I experienced in this divine light that I'm using are the upper crown Christ chakras that I experienced in my NDE. So check that out, and my courses. And I do a lot of teachings, and I also have guest teachers. So check that out. I also have some starseed services. So if you're interested in light code activations, past life, soul discovery, earth mission, angelic transmission, your galactic star channeling of your lifetime, or your earth mission here, or coaching, that's available, as well as I'm a highly trained evidential medium. And if you would like to connect to your loved ones and they have a whole conversation about you, it's a reunion for sure with evidence, then you can also check that out at southernbellemedium.com. And then finally, make sure you subscribe to this channel at the Seeking Heaven channel. And we have at least weekly, sometimes bi-weekly episodes, and I make sure I have terrific guests just like I have today. So before I bring in the guests, let me tell you a little bit about who's here today. I'm very excited. And today I have Victoria Reynolds. Now, let me tell you a little bit about her. I met her last year in March at the Sedona Ascension Retreat, and she had such a beautiful angelic presence and so full of grace. I immediately was attracted to her, and I thought she was lovely. And then my friend Joan of Angel said, "Oh, Victoria, she's great. She's my friend." So I had to meet her. She is an author of multiple books, such as Recreating Earth, Transcending Fear, Little Marigold, Free Your Spirit, Own Your True Worth, and Rise Up. And we're going to talk today about a really unusual topic, and that is escaping occult and finding true spirituality, because this topic is really key. People don't talk about it, but it's actually kind of common. So thanks for being here and willing to share a little bit of your story on this. So it's so good to see you.
Oh, it's so great to see you. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here.
Tell us how this experience, because you're so loving and open and spiritually aware. Maybe we should start with, we were talking about my perception of people that are attracted to higher level spiritual learning and join. Oh, I like to join a cult. I mean, people don't call it that. There's the all different, I don't need to say all that, who everybody kind of knows who these might be. What do you think? Why are people attracted to this higher level spirituality, and what do you consider makes it a cult, and when did you realize?
Well, in my particular case, I was born into it. Yeah, and I left when I was a teenager. But so it's really interesting that, to give you an idea, people don't realize they're in one when they're in them. You don't really realize until after you leave and you go back and go, "Oh, wow, that's what that was." So I remember I was in high school. Girls in my community were not allowed to go to school after 8th grade. I convinced my parents to let me go to public high school. And I was in public high school, and I heard about this in the 1980s, Luke and Laura, right? And Laura.
Luke Kennard?
No. What was the name of that show? The soap opera where there was Luke and Laura and General Hospital.
Days of Ireland. General Hospital. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, out in the real world, right, where I wasn't supposed to have access to that. We didn't have.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
I remember in that show, and it hit me. But I don't remember very much about that TV show, but one episode that just really got my attention. I think I was about 14 years old. Okay. And Laura had been convinced to join a cult. And I remember thinking, well, who would go join a cult? That's the craziest thing. I had no idea that I was actually living in one, that I had been born into one. So my parents were one of only 6 families when this started. It's still teeny tiny. There's the population's never been over 1,000 in the mountains of Montana. And It is a polygamous doomsday cult. So I was fed doomsday every day of my life. I had nightmares about it, night terrors about the end of the world. And we had the basement full of the supplies that you have to have in case the world comes to an end. And so it's been interesting for me with what's been happening.
Eat that now.
The last 2 years, I'm like, oh my God. So actually has been triggering these PTSD moments.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Because everybody's buying these food things. And then when they had a couple years ago or so, the toilet paper where you couldn't get toilet paper.
Yes. Yeah. And I
freaked out.
Well, and I started to recognize it as a PTSD effect when I started hearing these stories, and I've learned how to manage it and just kind of laugh at it now. But at first I remember going into tears. A friend of mine said, I've gotten the guidance. Everybody has to move to the mountain and have all this food. And I just lost it. I was like, I am the last person that's going to go to the mountains and buy 7-year supply of food. Did that already as a child.
Wow.
So it's been interesting navigating what's going on in the world right now because none of this is new for me. I grew up with all of these teachings, all of them. So for me, it's like hearing the stories I was taught as a child. But this time I'm able to navigate them without going into night terrors and things like that. So what I started to discover when I started doing my research about cults, because I realized in about 2012 that all of the pain and the suffering I'd felt in my life, and as an adult, why I could never break through all of this fear and doubt and self-confidence and self-esteem issues that I had, I started to realize they actually came from the religious beliefs of my childhood. And
that's tough.
My book, Transcending Fear, I wrote my first edition of Transcending Fear in 2012. And it was all about working through what I call fear-based beliefs. These are all fear-based beliefs from my childhood and the process my higher self gave me to heal my life at the time. So I put it into a book. I've rewritten that book in just last year with more information I've received since then, because at the time I had 2 little kids and now they're both young adults. So I added more to it and wrote a second edition of it just earlier this year.
This is going to help people if they've had, and I know it's tough to say the word cult. I mean, obviously people don't go, I'm going to sign up for it. Some people are born into it, but this is going to help them, right? If they get the book.
Yeah, it's everything it's everything my higher self gave me. Literally, it's the instructions to heal my life. So I went into every one of these fear-based beliefs that I was taught, and I put in this book. It actually wasn't a book to start with. It was my own notes that my higher self was teaching me how to heal my life. And at one point I went, I should probably put this on the computer. I had notebooks all over my house. I had them in my car. I have a whole filing cabinet full of notebooks. And I started putting it on my computer, and it started literally made itself into a book. It organized itself into a book, and that became Transcending Fear. It was never my intent to turn it into a book, but it was so helpful for me that I realized that it could help a lot of other people too. And so I started doing some research about cults. What was really interesting is that after my book came out, and I knew that the trauma I was experiencing in my life, why I'd never been able to have healthy relationships. I was married, but I couldn't really have a loving relationship with him because I was protecting myself so much, that all this came from these religious beliefs. And
can you give me some examples of what that might be? And then I want to say this, and well, my opinion is, and you've done probably more research than I have on this, but in these different new organized so-called spirituality cults, whatnot, they have their own lingo. And in the lingo I was in, called the S, we'll just leave it at that. They call it a dangerous environment. And so that's what they call it when people put you into this fear-based, a dangerous environment. And there are certain codes that's used. So what are some of the things that like, you said the food, keeping a big stock of food.
Right.
And then what, and that's because any day Armageddon, what's the reason for that?
They just kept changing the end of the world date. Right.
Oh my gosh.
So it's funny because my daughter came to me, back in like 2020. She goes, "Mom, the world's all going to last for 10 more years. They say that by 2030, the whole world's going to be underwater and blah, blah, blah." And I just looked at her. I said, "You know the number of times I've heard that in my life?"
I think this is good because there is right now, it's got to be tough for you because right now, and I do know two other people that were born in the same group that you were, and one's kept fairly decent relationships but away, and one said, "Heck no, I'm out." But the same thing where you're talking about storing a whole thing of food and harvesting the food and all this kind of stuff. But now, because there's certain things that have been planned against humanity. Oh my gosh, love to make this up. I can't say too much,
Right.
because we want to make sure everything's okay for this channel. But that it does put people in a fear thing, but at the same time, we are manifesting and creating, and we can disagree with that and say, "No, I'm not. I think it's ridiculous. I agree on a beautiful place to be here and live," and we can create that instead. But it is they're putting that out there, and people are buying these buckets of food. I'm thinking, do you want to 7 years later eat oatmeal, 7-year-old oatmeal?
Well, it's not a bad thing necessarily to have that. I live in California. I always had an earthquake box, just in the event of an earthquake. But it's when you literally energize it by focusing on it, and people aren't even aware that by focusing on that being their reality, they're actually energizing that reality. So I see that there is this plan out there, and it has been. It's not like it's a new plan. What people are talking about, I grew up with that. It's been going on since the 1960s. I explained to people the Ascension actually started in 1963. It's just now starting to
Really
gain enough traction.
Why?
Yeah.
Why 63? Well, you had the hippie movement, but
Correct.
do you think that's what it was?
Actually caused the hippie movement. It was the first waivers came in to start the hippie movement.
Okay. So the hippie movement, that was the first, and those were the people that
the people like Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer,
Dolores Cannon.
Yeah, they were part of the first wave. And so that wave started in the 1960s, very small, loving movement. And that's when the dark side of the contrast went on defense. So it's been growing ever since. And now what's happened with each level of awakening, that number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So what we've been dealing with since about 2017 and really since 2020 is the Great Awakening. Now, what started in the beginning of 2023 is what my team calls the mass awakening. So the masses of humanity are going to start waking up.
I've been told the same thing.
Right. So it needed to start small because each wave of awakening basically prepares the groundwork for the next wave of awakening. So we become the way showers for the next wave of awakening.
Right. And also the people being born in, there were certain types of people being born in that had agreements for the first wave, and then the second wave and third. And now, from what I'm understanding, is that certain children being born in now, they're like, they come in with full memory. Their forgetter installer isn't working. And they come in with abilities. They come in and they're shameless about it. Whereas I feel like our generation, if I can be so bold to say, you tell me what you think, that we were secretly learning spirituality. I remember being in the library studying Edgar Cayce at 12 years old. Everybody else is doing what people do. I think it was 12, 13, and on up in junior high. And I was private about it and secret about all these things, and a secret of my thoughts and whatever. And only till for the past few years, it's okay to speak of these things boldly and forthright. But I think that we had to wait to come out to play till it was safer. And I think our type of generation had to pave the way and get around the mechanism.
Correct. So for me, being born into that cult, I had this mass awareness about 10 years ago. Actually, I was driving down the freeway and I had this whole download about how I put myself there. on a soul level. I chose that environment. So when I was a little girl, I was told that I was one of God's most chosen children, that as a daughter of God, God chose for me to be a polygamist because that was part of it. I couldn't get into heaven unless I let my husband have at least 3 wives. And that women can't get into heaven unless a man deems her worthy enough to get in. So there was a lot of those that, right, there were a lot of very belittling when you were talking about which beliefs were these fear-based beliefs. A lot of them were from the patriarchy, that as a female, I wasn't worth getting an education. My worth was only the number of babies I could produce. I wasn't allowed to make money. Women didn't know how to manage money. Women weren't allowed to have jobs. Women weren't allowed to have an education, all this stuff that made me feel like, and I actually remember being told as a child, you're just a stupid girl.
Okay. I gotta piggyback you on this. Okay. So you women watching, it's been popular lately to tear down statues and erase history, but let me tell you, we must learn from our mistakes. We must learn how far we've come. There was a lady, and I'm going to piggyback on this, that I met when my husband, he was inducted into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame with this band, Fetch and Bones. And there was a lady, her aunt was like head of the funk movement, right? It was cool. She was cool, right? And so I know it was her cousin. Anyway, I told her, I said, my goodness, I used to have a little Barbie doll like you. Well, back then you didn't, it's a long time ago. You didn't have little African-American little dolls. They didn't make them. And she didn't understand that was a big deal because now it's more integrated. I'm like, she didn't get it. I'm like, no, it was different then. And
it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. And I'm thinking it's important she know that how we need to know how far we come. Because you know what I was told growing up? I was told that I was really pretty, so I could get any husband that I wanted. I was told I was stupid and that I didn't know to go to college. And this is true, so true. I've never said this, but I think this will help people listening. I was told that I was never told about college. I was in my senior year and I went to my best friend, who I'm still known all these years. Strangely enough, she's the only one I've kept in touch with. And I said, what is college? Now, we had the money. We weren't rich. We're pretty good. We're like high middle class, right? So we had the money. They didn't think that they didn't even believe in me enough to tell me about that. So I said, what is this thing called college? She said, well, if you don't go, you could be flipping hamburgers your whole life. And I went, well, that's not going to work. What is this thing? And immediately I started applying to colleges. I immediately went to my grandparents, who were always very supportive and everything. And they said, we've been waiting for this day. I said, what? They said, yeah, we knew this would happen. We got your back. And in their late 70s, they were paying for my school and my education. And I went to East Carolina University, and I was so glad to get on my own and to develop that. But I was told the very same thing. And I was told that that I was stupid. And it was my husband that I met many years ago. He said, ma'am, I have to correct you. She's the smartest girl I've met. And I had good grades, but if you're told so much that you're stupid, after a while you begin to believe it. Yeah, I had good grades.
Not egoically, but I got 100% on every test. I got straight A's.
Right. No,
but it was just that you're a stupid girl.
Yeah.
Told, and you'll never amount to anything. So why would you even try?
So what I want to say right here for the women watching, look at us. We broke through that. We're both public speakers. We both have self-esteem. Yeah, we may have days that things pop up in our face and we work through it, but we can handle it. We're grown up. But we've come far. We've come far as a divine feminine. We've come far. I don't need permission from anyone to speak my truth. And matter of fact, if someone says anything about that, I'll shut them down publicly. We should all be free to express ourselves. So we need to acknowledge how far we've come.
Patriarchy is a way to put it, although men get really, really defensive when you talk about, sorry, my cat is enjoying my computer.
The cat wants to chime in. She's like, I'm female. I've had it too. No, look, don't get me wrong, people listening. I love men. I've been with my husband 30-something years, okay? I love men. I do. I'm girly. I love men. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about equality and women being talked to like they don't have value. And there was a time that was.
Yeah, very much so. And I actually had someone send me an email a few months ago saying, "Don't." It says in the Bible that God made women for men and not the other way around. And I said, the Bible was written by men, about men, for men.
It's kind
God
of
did
true.
not make women for men. God made men and women to be partners, to work side by side for each other and with each other. And so the divine feminine has been rising. And as she rises, we place her on the mantle next to the divine masculine. That is when all of humanity wins. Whenever we put one above another, we run into issues. So we need to celebrate both the masculine and the feminine in equality and balance. And that is where we get the harmony. Really it's we need to celebrate that within ourselves. It's, as we were saying off camera, it's time to return the concept of lady and gentleman. The world needs gentlemen.
I can't even begin to tell you. I did a dating thing, Victoria. You'd get a hoot out of it. You'd really like it. But I did this. I had this idea, and I stand behind it. Now everybody's gonna watch it, but you should. I did this thing, and I had a laugh, and I asked male and female friends, and I did a thing on dating, and I asked people that were single, and I asked people that weren't in couples, and I said, "What is it you don't like when you're dating?" And I got all sorts of answers from the guys and the girls, my friends. And one was, "Don't go out and ask me how much I make." I said, "They did that? I didn't know that." And the other thing is, "Don't talk about yourself too much. Ask questions." But I got all these things. And one of the things that the guy said, because I didn't know what they were going to say, is they said they enjoy being the man and opening the door and doing these things. But some of the women wouldn't let them. And they enjoyed doing that. And so I got comments saying, that, "Oh, you're backwards." And I'm like, I don't care what you do. I think it shows respect. I think it's important to show the respect both ways.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And what's wrong with a little chivalry, right?
I like it. They like it. The other thing is that, what they like? They all said this too. They like when the woman flirted with them. They don't, they said they like that. And they said they didn't flirt. And most people don't know how to flirt. They're horrible at it. So let's go back to the situation. When you are born into something, and it could be, maybe it's not a cult, maybe it's just a way of thinking. It's really hard to reprogram yourself. When did you start realizing? Was it after Days of Our Lives that you went?
No, actually, before that. I think like you, I was always spiritually inclined. So even as a little girl, I would go to church, and I would go to we had church meetings every day, but I would go when I was genuinely interested. I wanted to learn about God and about spirit and the beliefs. I genuinely wanted to understand. I remember, when I was 3 years old, being told that God put me there, and I thought God must just be this mean man like my dad to put me in such a mean place, because everybody was so mean to me. And
you mean that's what you thought as a kid?
As a child. Yeah. And then when I was older, when I realized I put myself there, I went, oh, that makes so much more sense than this mean God. Yeah. My biggest conundrum was the concept of choice. That one took me forever to figure out, because I grew up with this belief that God had my entire life planned out for me. And that God already knew every decision I was ever going to make, that God knew me before I was born, that God knew what I was going to do with my life. He had my life all planned out. So I didn't need to make any choices at all. But I couldn't understand it's like, but we fought a war in heaven over the right to have free will choice. So if we're here and have free will choice, but God's got my life all planned out for me, what does choice have to do with it? And if God knew that I was going to make all these bad choices and I was going to go to hell after I died because I made bad choices, then why was I born to begin with? I couldn't wrap my head around this concept of choice.
Right.
I had no concept of choices and consequences until I was in my 20s. And I actually went to a spiritual center, and the minister was talking about how the choices we make determine our life. And I was like, what? Yeah. I had no idea choice was even a thing. And that choices that I make determine the direction of my life. I just thought God wanted me to be miserable. He had it all planned out. And all the bad things that happened in my life are because God wanted me to be unhappy. It was, and so I did have a lot of disbelieving to do.
Thank you so much for the work that you're doing and stepping forth and being an example.
Thank you so much. And likewise.
Please subscribe, like, and make comments, and support this channel by becoming a member. Thank you for your continued support.